I'm Amy Cubbage, Senior Advisor of Public Policy and Government Relations at Teachstone, and I'm thrilled to be here at Interact and with you all. And I am absolutely certain, as amazing as Gwen and Libby are in federal policy, that we have an amazing room full of knowledge and understanding, thoughts, and great questions about what is happening in Washington. So really look forward to an interactive exchange today and hearing what you're hearing in your states and local communities about what's happening in Washington. So thank you for being here. I am thrilled also to be joined by two fantastic co-presenters. They're two of my mentors, truly. I think my son, when I was a National Headstart Fellow in Washington, my first child was born during that time, and I was fortunate enough to have Joan Lombardi hold him first. She was and is a grandmother of early childhood education, and Gwen Chance was the second person, and she is a phenom herself. So all of my blundering in parenting over these years, I think back, he had such a good start in those early hours. How did I mess it up? Anyhow, I will turn it over to them to introduce themselves. Gwen.
Thank you. Good morning. It is indeed, hi Jackie, another fellow, a Head Start fellow back there. And our relationship as members or participants in the National Head Start Fellowship program has grown over the years, and it's been so exciting to, I think, my mentor in many ways being at the national level and sharing with us at the state level what's going on in early care and education. Anyway, I come from Head Start background in the 60s at the very beginning, so I've been with Head Start a little over 50 years. Starting out in Dallas, Texas, and I have served many, many different roles in Head Start, including the State Collab Director for the state of Texas, including TNTA, the most recent position that I have had and have enjoyed tremendously, and with the state of Louisiana that I sort of call a real model state right now with that whole collaboration piece that we tried so hard to bring together in Texas. The other thing is I've worked in early childhood programs, public school. I have been with the state education agency and child care. I did Title 20 child care back in the 70s. So my heart when it comes to children is about all children, no matter where the funding source. I've always believed that the greatest support that we can give children and families in this nation is to provide the same level of quality across all programs. So I'm excited to be here with you today to share some brief background and some things that are going on under the new performance standards. Libby Doggett, a very good friend of mine, is on the State Collab Advisory Committee.
Right, for a long time.
For a long time.
So my job is to be the historical perspective here. But first I want to welcome you to Austin. This is my home. In fact, my home is about half a mile from here. And this is Doggett country. So if you go about 4 blocks that way and 4 blocks east, you're in my husband's congressional district, which winds all the way down to San Antonio. But my expertise on public policy has really been more of an avocation instead of a vocation until more recently, when I worked proudly as a part of the Obama administration at the U.S. Department of Education, heading up the early learning agenda. So we'll talk more about that. But I think suffice it to say that I started out in Head Start as a volunteer at the University of Texas, organizing other students to go out to one of the brand new Head Start centers that was up at St. John's. It's no longer there because that area has totally changed. But I've worked at the local, state, and federal level, and I've worked with Head Start, child care, and schools with kids with disabilities and without. So I've kind of worked at all levels and across our whole field, and I'm delighted to be here. And really, I'm one of your biggest fans. I think what class has done and Teachstone has done around quality, not just in preschool, not just in Headstart, but in kindergarten, first and second grades and on up, has really made a difference. And I think, you're just even poised to take off and do more things. So I'm delighted to be here, and I appreciate, Amy, you're including me.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you very much. We're thrilled to be in Doggett country. So, what is the current federal climate? We have two archaeologists here who are deciphering some hieroglyphics and say it appears to be some sort of tax cut promise. So I couldn't resist this one because it feels like that. I still absolutely know that the hardest work I've ever done is teaching, but then deciphering federal budgets are kind of getting to be a closer second for me these days. It's getting harder, and it probably will only get more confusing, but we just have to keep our nose to the grindstone and ask questions. Never be afraid, right? When we don't understand, and I hope you know absolutely in this room, I am a queen of asking the stupid question. Like, so wait, if the continuing resolution gets passed for a week and Trump says he wants to do an omnibus, then that's all new reallocations for 2017, but still, what does that mean for his proposals for FY18 to 9% cuts to the education department, or 18%? So it's a lot. So ask away, please, and I hope that among the three of us we can answer, or we can get the answer back to you. Okay. So following Grover and Sesame, I couldn't resist an alphabet soup when late breaking news came out to me last night that it was going to be Grover. I thought, oh, fun, I could do a word cloud and throw some alphabet soup right back into the world of our early childhood education. As you know, federal education policy is full of acronyms. Just that is a struggle in understanding sometimes. And these are some of the acronyms you'll hear in our presentation this morning. ACF, the Administration for Children and Families. MCR, this is a newer one, and it's out of the National Head Start Association. I hope they'll forgive me for using it and sharing it with you all. But a mission control room, really a sort of buckle down the hatches. We are here, we are going to stay, we are critical to the well-being of children and families in America. So I like that. If you hear MCR, that's where that came from. IDEA is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. A CR over there, the continuing resolution that we're hoping will continue to fund the federal government and avoid any shutdown come midnight on Friday or Saturday morning, early hours of Saturday morning. Over to your left, OCC, the Office of Child Care, still waiting on appointees, on word of an appointee to that office in ACF. CDCTC, the Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit, an important one these days as we talk about tax policy. DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services. ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. We did CR, you know NHSA, the National Head Start Association, one of our partners, good friends and great advocates. QRIS, Quality Rating Improvement Scale, except in one state, my current home state, we have decided we're not calling it Quality Rating Improvement System, we call it the Quality Recognition and Improvement System. Interesting tidbit from the last month or so in Connecticut. And CCDBG, the Child Care Development Block Grant. OHS is the Office of Head Start, and ED, commonly referred to as ED, is the Department of Education in Washington, where Libby was director of the Office of Early Learning. So we do have our own agenda that I'm going to get to before the session ends, but what are your current hopes and fears is what we would like to hear. If you would just throw them out so that we can note them and be sure that we incorporate them into our agenda or drop things off our agenda if we need to make time for you all, because the people who know much better than I do about how to organize a conference gave us only 50 minutes. And I have no bitter feelings at all, and I will not throw anything at Campbell when she holds up the 10-minute and then the 1-minute sign at me any minute. It's not Campbell's fault. So what are you hearing? Yes?
Well, this has been going around for years, but it still concerns me that they're going to move Headstart over to the Department of Ed.
Okay, good one. Thank you for throwing that out. So currently Headstart is in the Department of Health and Human Services, and will they move that over to the Department of Ed? Libby's going to note that one. Anything else? Yes, in the back, in the green.
Well, I've heard from NHSA and from our Washington State Association that the most likely scenario for Head Start this year is flat funding. And I do wonder if some of the things in the last week have changed that thought process.
Okay, yep, thank you. So keeping the FY17 budget flat funded, despite calls for increases, is it going to be flat funded, and then fears of could it be cut? Yes. Yes.
We're a K-12 or pre-K-12 school district.
Yes.
And any federal grant funding that you might be able to steer us towards would be helpful.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes.
And just to piggyback on that, what the potential future for pre-K expansion grant might look like.
Yes. Could you say it again?
Pre-K expansion grant, I'm sorry.
So the preschool development
The
grant
preschool development.
project, yeah, it had both the preschool expansion grants and preschool development grants. And you were asking, is there any future for the preschool development and expansion grants for the fourth year of funding? That's
Yeah, or even beyond, because I know it got written into ESSA.
Yeah.
I don't know like where it's going.
yes, yep, we have that in here. Thank you. That's a good one. Yes.
Federal programs such as AmeriCorps, I know they're having a vote if it's going to stay, if it's not going to stay, how that affects if that funding pot goes away. Other programs that are in existence, now everyone fighting for the same pot of funding because a lot of funding may be eliminated.
Yes. And how much some of those small programs that were named for cuts for FY18, so that would be October 1 of this year, are incredible supports for our schools. And in fact, when Trump suggested cuts to Corporation for Public Service and after school programming, energy assistance, et cetera, and gave or proposed giving money toward 3 large charter school systems, those CEOs of the charter schools wrote an op-ed in USA Today, I think, or Newsweek or Time, saying, thank you so much, we appreciate it so much, but no way, we can't take that. We depend on volunteers from AmeriCorps and City Year. We absolutely, our families need the energy assistance and depend on that. We can't have these cuts to the people and families that we serve. So thank you, that's a great one too. Others, yes?
Yeah, there's always the fear of the Taiko development block grant and consequently how it's going to affect the school readiness funding, which we all get as pass-through funding, and consequently how is it going to affect the QRIS, the quality initiative. So
Yes.
it's always a fear.
Always a figure. Okay, thank you. We are struggling with that in Connecticut. We're trying to stick to the standards, not get a waiver for the new regs, and still provide slots for kids. And we're absolutely hitting a massive crisis on that. All right, great, thank you. And of course, that wasn't your only chance. I hope you'll get other chances to ask questions and share your ideas. So for the agenda, we reviewed what are your current hopes and fears and concerns at the federal level. We're going to move into federal budget updates right now. I've touched on some of them, and then some federal policy updates. So the federal budget, I'm gonna have Libby join me in talking about this, but I need my notes. I know one thing that is way easier than teaching in public policy work is that you can be on a treadmill and do your work early in the morning and watch MSNBC and get your late breaking news to share in your federal policy updates session. You can't do that as a teacher with kids. So as I was doing that, the late breaking news is that Trump has backed off insistence on building the wall or having the wall funded, excuse me, in this next continuing resolution, which again would be for April 28th, which is Friday at midnight, and said I still am absolutely doing that, but I can hold off on funding until fall when we go through the regular budget appropriations till the new FY starts in 2018. So I don't even know if I got that in here. I got it in my notes, but not up here. So we're hoping for a new stopgap measure. All indications are that there will not be a shutdown. That's latest coming out of both Congress, which, as you all know, is controlled by Republicans now, and the White House, the administration, controlled by Republicans, as well as Democrats saying that they don't foresee that. And of course, I'm sitting with the spouse of a congressman up here, so I will absolutely, if she gets a text from her husband on anything that's changed on that, we'll let you know. So by the end of September, we will have appropriations bills that come in, and we would hope for a regular budget process, but that actually hasn't happened in the last few years. So we don't know if that is going to happen or will continue to bump along with continuing resolutions. Trump asked for $1.5 billion for this fiscal year so he can start construction of the wall, as well as in his budget blueprint for FY 2018, saying that, as he said on the campaign trail, Homeland Security and defense are huge priorities for him, and that he will be asking us to batten down the hatches in other ways to afford some pretty significant increases in those areas. Fortunately, in that budget blueprint for FY 2018, he did say that in the Department of Health and Human Services budget, early care and education was a top priority, along with community health centers. So, and no mention of cuts to Headstart. The concern is with Headstart and with other programs in early care and education is that a lot of appointees and a lot of advice we're hearing that's flowing into the White House has come from a far-right think tank, the Heritage Foundation, which put out its own budget blueprint that cuts Headstart by 10% over 10 years to defund it completely by 2027. And so there is a concern there that he was influenced by that. But so far, nothing from the White House saying that they would follow that. Yeah.
So just to reiterate and kind of expand on a little bit of what Amy said, you've done some great sleuthing. You know, we're very fortunate to have her. And if she sends out emails, read them, because she knows what she's talking about. I think we will continue to hear the word shutdown and hear that thrown around. I don't think it'll happen, like Amy said, but you're going to hear it on the news, because the news is, you know, they want to hype it up. And every department, every agency right now is preparing for one. They have to. And so, you know, those plans are moving forward, even though, you know, everybody's very hopeful that it won't happen. It is very damaging when it happens. It doesn't affect early childhood quite as much because, you know, I think children continue to go to centers, and Headstart had found a way. I mean, it was interesting. We even had a foundation that came and helped get Headstart through the last shutdown. But it is very damaging for the parties, both the Democrats and the Republicans, because it just makes them look like they don't know how to run government, they can't get along, people can't get passports, you can't get, it's I mean, it's really, the border kind of closes down in some ways, and when I was part of the shutdown last time, and I just started, and we were told we could not work. I mean, you know, well, I, of course, was working at home and reading stuff, but we couldn't go on and do email or answer email. So it is very damaging. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope, you know, but I think you'll continue to hear threats of it. This is all sleuthing. I mean, we can give you what we think right now, and I think Amy's right on target, but it's like those anthropologists, it's trying to find any little crumb there, because there's really not good information out there. I think the Trump administration is pretty closed. They haven't appointed a lot of people. It's not like everybody has good inroads to them. And so what we're trying to do is pick up any crumb we can find to make some sort of prediction of what's going to happen. I think we will have a continuing resolution for this year. So this year's money is going to be just like last year. It's interesting, the preschool development grants that I know some of you are interested in was supposed to move over to HHS. With the continuing resolution, it stays at Ed, which is much better, because trying to set up a mechanism in a year to send out money for the last year through HHS just doesn't make sense. And we were trying to make sure we didn't have to do that. With the continuing resolution, we don't have to. You know, there's only so much firepower they have. And the fact that we're going to get a continuing resolution while it's good, it's not necessarily good, because they're using their firepower for the next budget. And that is going to be damaging, because there's just no way you can take as much money as they want for defense and homeland security and veterans affairs and not make very, very significant cuts elsewhere. We have just returned from a trip to Japan and South Korea, which was a very timely visit. And when you see what is happening there and the importance of defense, we need good defense, but we also know that we need kids that can go into the military. And we know that statistic that 75% of our children who are eligible for the military can't get in because they can't pass the cognitive tests, they can't pass the physical tests, or they've gotten in trouble with the law. So we know that our job is very important in really trying to couch it in ways that appeal to the people who are talking about defense would be a good way to do it. I think the other thing to watch is, how are they going to pay for things? In the past, we've kind of kept a lid on the federal deficit by requiring that there be a pay for. It's called just a pay for. So whenever the Democrats wanted something, the Republicans would come in and say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, I think now the Republicans they want a wall, they want all this more spending in certain areas, and they want tax cuts. Well, how are they going to pay for it? So we're going to have to see if that pay for, which has kind of kept things level, stays in place, or if it's thrown out the window and our deficits rise.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Libby. Okay, I do have this slide, and we will share all of these slides with you either through the app, or I think there is a sign-in sheet going around, so please put your name and email, and we'll be sure to get those all out to you. I won't run through all these budget by agency proposed cuts or increases, but this comes from President Trump's budget blueprint that came out in March, as it should be, as a standard operating procedure in Washington. And these were some of the cuts in education, a proposal for FY 2018 of 13%. For HHS, it was a 18% cut. And so this is just to reiterate what Libby said, that this is something we're watching very carefully. We're not, nobody I think is, nobody should be resting on any reassurances of, okay, CR, keeping the funding levels for 2017. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Gwen to review the first area of focus on Headstart.
Thank you. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Gosh. And I want to say we started out just outstanding this morning, particularly listening to some of the same research that Libby just cited again, that Rebecca Berlin shared with us this morning, and Steve's program to support, Steve Youngblood, Teachstone partnership with Sesame Street to support the work in the field of early care and education, quality teaching and learning, and supporting teachers. Now, I would like to very briefly share with you just a brief background of Head Start. How many of you in here are Head Start? I wanted to ask that. Wow, great. That means you can answer a lot of questions as well, which is great. I really appreciate it. And how many of you are primarily LEAs, local education agencies? Okay, but so many of you probably both Head Start and local ed. And then how many are child care, fall under one of the funding? Okay, great, wanted that diversity in the room. Yeah. So thank you, because we want you to feel free, as we said, interactive, to share out as we move forward. But briefly with Head Start, I just wanted to share with you, it's almost 52 years. This next year will be 52 years that Head Start was established by Congress under the Lyndon Baines Johnson administration. And it was all about, much of what we've talked about today, to serve the poorest of the poor in terms of their educational needs was the first focus. Then other researchers came in and said, but we can't really meet the children's educational need if we don't look at the whole child and look at the family. And that's when Head Start, as they were forming, this national panel of experts were creating Head Start. They created a comprehensive program to serve the poorest of children and families in our nation. It's important to note, and I say this to lots of programs that I work with, that Head Start, we need to really share. We are a national laboratory for research in the field. We have always had a body of standards, some not always the best, but over years, over time, and especially with the reauthorization in 2007, were really strengthened when we moved towards teachers being credentialed as teachers of young children, and criteria for assistance, a stronger criteria for training of all staff, and the whole piece around parent, family, community engagement, because Head Start has always promoted the fact that the parent is the first teacher of children, and we need to respect that and support that. Head Start has served over 33 million children from birth to 5 and their families in the U.S., as well as trust territories such as the Marshall Islands, Guam, and Puerto Rico. Through the Head Start CCP program, child care centers and family child care providers have access to resources to provide the comprehensive services needed to support quality for the most vulnerable children in our nation. And there is a national resource center for infants and toddlers that have lots of wonderful training materials and resources to support not only Head Start, but child care. And I think there's been a deliberate initiative this year, I don't know how far along it is, of bringing those two together, making it known that those resources are there, and the importance of shared training. I think shared training is critical in Head Start and child care, and more programs are beginning to do that. And especially, I think, with the class model, where programs, Head Start programs are working with local education agencies to serve children. They are also providing training resources around class for those teachers. Let's see, I'm gonna quickly, because I don't want to, I have other things.
Maybe I could just
Okay,
late breaking.
Yeah. Oh, late breaking, great.
No, late breaking federal updates, sorry. But late breaking news that we can stay in the room till 11:15 because lunch will not be ready until 11:15. That said, if you had plans to scoot at 11:05, which I think was our initial time that we were ending, it's 10 of 11 now.
Okay.
Feel free to take off, but okay.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
but I mean, you can still move along because we actually do have quite a few other things to cover, but this is fantastic.
Okay, thank you. And I want to reiterate what was said over and over again this morning and even on the first day, all about research. That it's the research that's driving a lot of the changes that are occurring at the national level, particularly with early care and education. Let's see, in 2016, $294 million in supplemental funding was appropriated for existing Head Start, early Head Start programs to increase the number of hours and days. That's been recent. And research says over again, and everyone in the room I know is aware that the more intense and longer the training or the day for being exposed to education, the better off our children will be. The research that talks about over the summer, even just with regular programs, how children lose if they're not stimulated in a lot of learning ways. The programs, this is a new requirement and it's in the new performance standards as well, and they are required they have specific criteria for how to plan out based on their local design. They're not told how to do it, they're just given the parameters for it. In the late 90s, Congress appropriated funding to establish state Head Start offices and started out in a couple of states. Texas was one of the first ones that received that round of money. Then all states in the union were funded. The whole purpose of that was to begin to bring all of the different early care and education initiatives together to work together, and particularly, especially bringing Head Start back to the state and local level, working with LEAs, child care, and Health and Human Services. And that's when earlier we said we had a statewide task force at that time, and I think there still is one today here. Let's see, and then in the late 90s, Congress appropriated funding to establish the state Head Start offices, and then where I wanted to go from there is a wonderful initiative was the Head Start Fellowship that a number of people all over the nation have had an opportunity to participate in. Another final piece of the history is the Comprehensive Training and Technical Assistance Network. Network has always been there, but in more recent times, the past, starting with the reauthorization of 2007, they became comprehensive training and technical assistance system networks, utilizing experts at the university, at national laboratories, who applied for grants and who are writing beautiful materials and laying out training for support of local programs. Lots of standards to meet, need lots of support to meet those standards. And I actually brought some resources that I'm going to pass around shortly after I talk just briefly about the new changes. Kind of cut back. Okay, yeah. Okay. Okay, the only thing I wanted to do is professional development. I'll just point out some quick things. With professional development, the new change in the performance standards is that all programs must hire a qualified coach, person who serves as a coach for that program, who they have training criteria identified and background experience information. And the program, however, is the requirement is research-based, curricula that is identified to be used, and they have to establish a plan. And then there's just a litany of requirements, things laid out, but the program can design it based on their own need. They're not required to do a particular curricula. I want to stress that. Someone said something about the Office of Head Start is providing practice-based coaching as a model that they have purchased through a national center, but it's no mandate that programs have to use it. But it is there and available and can be integrated with other.
We did a crosswalk with Head Start, the new Head Start program performance standards, which were issued in final form in the late summer, early fall of 2016. And we did a crosswalk of what programs and services that can support programs using the class to the standards. And I have a few of those that I'll send around, but it's also going to be available in the app. We'll send that around. Did you want to do the
Tell me which one.
engage? Do you want to touch on any of the
Yeah,
others?
the
Or do you feel it's-
parent family community engagement.
Yeah.
It's just been codified. It's always been there, but there are very specific requirements. And one of the key requirements is the attendance policy. Programs now must focus on educating, working with, engaging parents based on individual challenges, but all around working with attendance in the program so that that's established before they leave Head Start. The lots of training activities. Curricula is required now, research-based curricula for parenting education, so that's a new piece. Then the suspension and expulsion is an absolute no. Except when it comes to the safety of the children and staff, there's very specific steps about what one must take, and this encompasses the parent, the family, before making a decision. And then even if they have to, they may work with them at home for a while to help them come back to the program. If they have to move them to expose them, remove them from the program, they must, I see it this way, wrap around that child and family and literally work with another program to accept that child. They cannot leave the child out. So those were the primary new things.
We could have a whole
comment.
session with Gwen and your fantastic history on Head Start. And it is incredible to think of just where we've come with Head Start. And I my shackles get raised when people say, oh yeah, we might just cut Head Start, like we might just cut CCDBG. And I'm all about CCDBG too. But the history of Head Start is not just no offense to us early childhood folks, it's not just an early childhood program, folks. It is it was on the backs of Head Start parents and organizers that we fought back in the civil rights movement and protected human rights in America. And so to just talk about cutting Head Start is talking about cutting a lot more than a subsidized childcare program. I mean, it is, as we know, the comprehensive services, as we know, the parent and family engagement, breaking that cradle to prison pipeline. So it is empowering parents, voting rights. It encompasses a lot. And so thank you for that good history. Gwen's coming around with that. And I'm just going to quickly, before we jump to Essa and Ed with Libby, touch on the national discussion. Again, NHSA is leading the way with protecting out of their mission control room, funding Head Start, preventing block granting, and keeping the field together. No word to answer the question on moving Head Start out of the Department of Health and Human Services to Department of Ed. I think that discussion is dead or quiet at this time and won't be happening, is our best guess. NHSA has been working hard to preserve current funding. To the question about whether it will be flat or increase, I think flat would be our best hope and dream right now. And we're hopeful that we can, especially with of 160 signatures that they got in a very fast effort to get a letter out, a Dear Colleague letter to protect 2017 funding when there started to get rumored, well, maybe we will cut Head Start. It was, I want to say 67% were Republican signatures. So that was huge, a huge win, and a show of support for Head Start, a bipartisan support. Is DRS, the designation renewal system, going to be changed? Will Head Start be reauthorized? Probably not in 2017, hopefully not in 2017. Keep focused on administering the program as it is. There's possibly tech amendments, possibly a regulatory change to DRS. Probably that would come with legislation and when it's reauthorized. We have talked about and think about and would love to hear from all of you on your ideas on a potential third way within the designation renewal system. So there's 7 ways that a grantee can get into recompetition, and one of them being not meeting class thresholds. And there is no option. It's either compete or recompete, or you stay in and you're not competing. And a third way being sort of a probationary professional development track that you would be mandatory PD to improve interactions. We talked about the appointments to the Office of Head Start and Office of Child Care will take more time, probably. And probably right now, the block grant bills that went around the House and the Senate are not going to move forward. They were more empowered than ever, I think. They have been submitted before, and they usually die quickly, and there seemed to be just a little more interest in, maybe we'll explore this time around. But right now, the national advocates are not so worried about that happening. Okay. Libby, thanks.
Great. That was wonderful to get an update on Head Start, because it is our national program, and we are in LBJ's territory too. And when you think what happened during the Johnson administration, it shows you how important leadership is. To think under one administration, we got ESSA, which was the first time we, big money go into education. We got Head Start, we got the Higher Education Act, we got the Civil Rights legislation, lots more. So who is at the top really makes a difference. I think in essence of time, I'm going to try to tell you 4 things, I think five ways that I think the Department of Education could be leveraged, and will give you an opportunity to think about how can you use the Department of Education, what should you keep your eye on there. First of all, ESSA was critical. It did pass. It's in legislation. A lot of the regulations have been retracted, but the legislation itself is there. So please read it. We did non-regulatory guidance around early learning. We worked really hard to get early learning to be a part of the bill. It's no longer, just K-12. It's birth to 12. And I think if you look through it, you'll see that we were able to sprinkle early learning as much as possible throughout it. We could have gotten more, but we got as much as we could. So look at that. The preschool development grants are in there. As you know, they were transferred over to HHS. I think that's one thing to watch. Will they remain? Will HHS actually fight to get them funded? I would predict maybe not. They have enough fight on their hands to do the Head Start and child care, which are huge dollars. Preschool development grants is just pittance. It was our effort at the Obama administration, a way to bring education, to bring schools to the table, because we think this is a 3-legged stool. It's education with regular ed and special ed, it's Head Start, and it's child care. And with those 3 legs, we will have a system, but without all 3, we won't have the system we want. So we watch that, use ESSA, and then watch what happens with the preschool development grants. Also watch and see what happens to our Office of Early Learning. I headed it up. It was a pleasure to do that. I left a strong team in place, whether they get a director, whether they get someone at my level I was a deputy assistant secretary heading up that office. Will tell you how much they care about early education at the Department of Education. Look at other programs. You want to know where to go get grant funding. There's not a lot of grant funding, but look at Promise Neighborhoods. We should be leveraging those dollars. Full service community schools. The I-3 is a great way to test new models and to get money for expansion of great models. Look at the Institute for Educational Sciences. They have done incredible research, and I think it could be very, very helpful to look there. So don't just look at the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, but look throughout, because we've really tried to strengthen the whole department in terms of thinking around early learning. So third thing is look at appointees. Amy said they're going to be a long time coming, probably at the Department of Ed. Will we have somebody who's overseeing early learning? That's a big question. I don't know. Under the Bush administration, we had a person who was a senior advisor to the secretary, but we didn't have an office, we didn't have a deputy secretary. That in and of itself is a big signal about what's going to happen. And then finally, really look at collaboration. We were really proud of what we did with HHS. I know many of you probably saw that Linda Smith and I did a lot of joint presentations. We had an interagency policy board. Through that policy board, we were able to release 7 policy statements, one on suspension and inclusion, one on family engagement, one on inclusion of kids with disabilities, because we were working at Ed really closely with our office in the that's funded through IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So, look at the collaboration and see, is there going to be collaboration between Ed and HHS? We've built a strong foundation. We've built this interagency policy board, and whether that will continue, I think, will be a signal to us of how much we're able to use Ed to supplement and support the great work that Headstart and Child Care are doing.
Thank you. Yeah. I had put that slide up for you, but I think you touched on it. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. And again, you'll get these slides, all of you. So CCDBG, just quickly, I think, Padma, I kind of in answering your question or your concern, raising your concern, which is a critical one and one that we need to keep our eye on, is there going to be funding for CCDBG, and how are the regs that are increasing the costs of childcare, because we want it to be quality, cutting into subsidies and causing issues with that. We're also looking at the professional development set aside, which is going to increase up to 9% of each state's block grant, as well as the focus on infant toddler. And 5 more minutes. Quickly on federal policy developments, I'm going to just very quickly run through tax policy, because I think that this is a potential for some changes, coming. First, keep your eye on whether in Congress or out of the administration, the discussion is about credits or deductions. The focus of early childhood advocates right now watching tax policy is to ensure that they are credits. Credits can be refundable. You do not have to have tax liability, meaning you don't have to have paid taxes to get tax credits if they are refundable. With a deduction, you must have paid taxes to get a deduction. And generally, deductions are higher impact for wealthier individuals or families. So keep your eye on that and don't be fooled when a discussion or proposal comes out saying, hey, deductions. Say, hey, we'll take credits. Think about increasing what we can take as a tax credit for the child and dependent care tax credit. A critical support for families could be used much more targeted, in a much more targeted manner to support low-income families, increase the availability of that to meet working class and middle income families so that they can take advantage of it. Ask folks, how does it help families when they need to pay for childcare on a weekly or monthly basis to get that credit after the fact? The money is due now. You can't wait, right? Especially if you're going paycheck to paycheck. Ask those questions. Another one to keep your eye on is the American Opportunity Tax Credit. I don't have that in here. I will put that as a bullet so that you keep your eye on it, because I think it's an important one to allow the use of this tax credit that's currently only available for higher education to be used for paying expenses of early childhood education. As you know, the statistics across the country are pretty crazy for how much parents are actually paying for early childhood vis-a-vis what a 4-year education costs in their state universities and colleges. And then another one is increase the limits on the dependent care assistance program. Okay, now my sign is really up. My time and the sign is up. Okay, thank you. So just quickly, that one says to employers, do the right thing. Provide assistance for your employees by setting up dependent care tax credits and making them available to all workers. Right now, the statistics are 58% of professional and managerial staff can get money from their employer to use for childcare expenses and early childhood education, but only 18% of service workers and folks who are working hourly jobs. So again, let's look at who needs the help the most and target it right there, especially when we're in a budget crunch. You know, at some point, 100%, we're behind you. It's a good one. Don't go.
Well, Amy's looking for that.
All children only get one chance, and the United States is too great of a country to let this critical time period lapse. We know that every single hour and day is 1 hour and day too late. So we have to work super hard and super fast, like people have been doing, like all of you are doing every day. And quickly, any wrap-up comments, Libby or Gwen?
I want to reiterate about the tax credits. That's where we might get something, but just, you know, they are a compromise. Because for those of us who care about this, we want a system. We want something that's really a system where you know that where there's leverage, how you impact it. And as long as we're just doing it through tax credits, we're not building the system. So we're allowing people to have access, but we're not building that system. So we want both.
Okay. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Libby.